Please subscribe and you can download this code from description below. Title: Understanding Python Attribute Error, Point Object has no attribute X. Introduction. Python is a versatile and widely used programming language known for its simplicity and readability. However, you may encounter various errors while coding. One common error is the attribute error, which is raised when you try to access an attribute or method that does not exist in an object. In this tutorial, we will focus on the attribute error, point object has no attribute X error, and how to handle it. We'll walk through the basics and provide a code example to help you understand and resolve this issue. Understanding the attribute error. The attribute error occurs when you try to access an attribute of an object that the object does not have. This can happen for several reasons. Code example. Let's consider a simple example with a custom class called Point. The Point class is intended to represent a point in a 2D space with X and Y coordinates. However, we will introduce a deliberate mistake to trigger the attribute error. In the code above, we have created a point object P1 with an X attribute, but we attempted to access the Y attribute, which was never defined in the class. This will raise an attribute error. Handling the attribute error. To handle this error, you can take one of the following approaches. Conclusion. The attribute error, point object has no attribute X error, is a common issue when working with Python. To resolve it, you should double-check your code to ensure that you are using the correct attribute name or define the missing attribute in your class. Understanding and handling this error will make your Python coding experience smoother and more error-free. ChatGPT. In Python, the attribute error is a common error that occurs when you try to access an attribute, a variable or method, on an object that doesn't have that attribute. This error is raised when the requested attribute is not found within the object's namespace. In this tutorial, we will explore this error with a code example, understand its causes, and learn how to resolve it. The attribute error is often accompanied by a message that provides information about the attribute that couldn't be found. In this case, we'll focus on the error message related to a missing attribute called X in a point object. Let's create a point class as an example. Now, we will attempt to access the X attribute of a point object. If you run this code, you will get the following error. This error message is telling us that the point object P does not have an attribute named X. Typo or incorrect attribute name. The most common cause is a simple typographical error or a misunderstanding of the attribute's name. Double-check the spelling and case sensitivity of the attribute you are trying to access. Missing attribute. It could be that the object you are working with simply doesn't have the attribute you are trying to access. In our example, the point class does not have an X attribute. Wrong object type. Ensure that you are using the correct object or instance. If you are working with a different object, it may not have the attribute you expect. Incorrect object initialization. Make sure that you have correctly initialized the object with the necessary attributes. In the point class example, you should provide values for X and Y when creating an instance. To resolve the attribute error, you should do one or more of the following. Check spelling and case. Double-check that you are using the correct attribute name with the right spelling and case. Python is case sensitive. Verify object type. Make sure you are working with the right object or instance that should have the attribute. Initialize objects correctly. If you are creating objects from a class, ensure that you are providing the required attributes during initialization. Modify the class. If the attribute is missing in the class, you may need to modify the class definition to include the missing attribute. Here is an example of modifying the point class to include the X and Y attributes. By following the steps above, you can identify and resolve the attribute error in your Python code when you encounter it. Remember to pay attention to your code and make sure you are accessing the right attributes from the right objects. ChatGPT